Hey everybody, it's Arrow Shogun here, and today I'm going to do a video on programming career advice because I get a lot of people asking me this, not only on Discord through DMs, but people asking me in Celestina comments on the TFM show. So I figured maybe it would actually be a good idea to try and give some people some advice so they know where to go, understand what to look for, understand what to expect in some instances. Because I know it's very easy to just say, yeah, just Google it. But there are some people that need some specialized advice, and I totally understand why, and honestly speaking, I'm gonna do what I can to expand on that, okay? So here we go. Now, the most important question is not what language should I learn, where should I go to school, or what books should I read, but the most important question, and this is not something you want to ask me, you have to ask yourself, is what do you want to do? Because if you don't know exactly what you want to do, then there's not much of a point in actually getting into an industry like this. And just as importantly, you want to find out, or should I say ask yourself, do you have a mental affinity for programming? Do you have an aptitude for it? Or is this just something that you want to have as a career because you know it's going to pay you a lot of money and you want to have something that's going to be stable for the future? Okay, assuming you're still with me here, let's go back to the question I asked earlier. What exactly do you want to do in this industry? Because until you understand exactly what you want to do, you can't exactly go forward. Would you try to drive somewhere without knowing where you're going? You can't just go aimlessly into this and just hope it works out. Because going into anything without a plan is stupid. I'm just going to be frank about that. Don't be stupid. So I don't know what it is you may want to do. I don't know if you want to code games, drivers, kernels, operating systems, web pages, quantum computing, servers, whatever. So the first thing you want to do is you actually want to search up on that type of industry and what exactly is required to get into that. Not just what languages you want to learn, if there's any certifications necessary, and so forth. So I do not have a degree, and yet I have a job working on Windows 10 driver development, okay? So a degree is not always required, but a degree helps, okay? So the languages I use are C, C++, and some assembly. Because I'm old school, those are the languages I prefer. If you're a web dev, I recommend learning HTML5, JavaScript, CSS, and a little Java and C# wouldn't hurt you either. Although I'm not a web dev, I personally don't care for web dev. It doesn't even interest me. That's just me. For games, definitely learn C++. C# is another good one to know, especially when dealing with tools development. I don't recommend C# for games, but that's just me. Learning pure C is awful helpful. Sometimes. It really depends. Some of you may not ever need to learn it, but I recommend it. And almost all languages have some basis in C or C++ these days. So learning those will not hurt you in the slightest. In fact, they may end up helping you. Only C, C++, they're more lower level and more focused on native development. Whereas something like JavaScript is more high level and more geared towards web development or hybrid application development. But let's say you know what language you need to learn, and you're going to ask me, well, how do I go about learning it? Where do I start? What books do you recommend, or websites and whatnot? Now, honestly speaking, that's where Google comes in, okay? Because I didn't have anyone to ask, at least most of my time as a programmer. Of course, when I first started, I didn't have internet. This was in the 80s, and I just had to I found what I could at random intervals. I didn't have support from family, friends, because not only did they not know, but my talent back then was a very foreign thing, so they didn't know how to nurture it or even recognize it. And sometimes you have to be prepared for that to be your case also. So learning how to do things yourself is very, very important, because if you can't search up basic information If you can't find out how to get yourself unblocked in certain scenarios, then yeah, you're not going to be doing too well in this industry, and this industry may not be right for you. Because a lot of times, if you have to ask, then frankly, you're just not cut out for this. But I'm not saying that's the case for all of you, okay? Because you have to start somewhere, of course. So assuming you want to be something like a web developer or something, because that seems to be one of the most common things that people want to get into, especially since the job rate for web developers is increasing, and people just want to get into it because it's hot. My recommendation to you is to start with a website called w3schools.com, okay? There is so much information on that website, and it'll keep you busy for a long, long, long time. It's like an endless sea of programming information. You'll learn how to build websites. You can learn how to do graphics, JavaScript, and all sorts of stuff. So there's always something interesting to learn there. Now, I'm actually kind of surprised people ask me this one. How much time should I spend programming every day? Now, honestly speaking, if you're very interested in programming, and if it's really something that interests you, you're not going to place yourself on restrictions on how much time you're going to spend learning to code. You're going to dive into it, and you're going to take as much time as you need. Now, a programmer that takes programming seriously, or at least on the level that many of us do, we have our mind on our code and our code on our mind every day. Because I'm always thinking about, what can I code next? How can I optimize this? How can I fix that? What can I do to improve what's already been built? Or what was my next move? Or what else should I learn to stay ahead of the game? That is the mentality a lot of programmers have, okay? So there's no set amount of time that you should learn every day. In fact, if you want to spend all day, every day, do it. The point is this: do whatever you have to do to learn it, okay? If you have to spend more time than usual to learn it, do it. Because if it's important to you, you're going to learn it, okay? That's all. I say this because if you love it, you'll dedicate time to it. And dedicating time to it won't become a chore. It won't be like an obligation. It's something that you want to do. Now, while you're actually learning the language and learning how to do stuff, and how to build software, web pages, or whatever, you want to experiment every so often. You want to see what you can learn outside of the curriculum, okay? Because you can't always just stick to a strict curriculum and just do everything completely verbatim. It doesn't always work that way, because the programming world is actually a very dynamic one, and it requires some dynamic thought process a lot of times. So my recommendation to you is always work on your portfolio too. As you learn, experiment, do some side projects, see what you can do, challenge yourself, push yourself, and stay focused, okay? Because when you go to when you're looking for a job, they're going to wonder, now what exactly have you done? Are you just someone who just went to a 4-year degree, got the degree, and done nothing else and say, okay, I'm entitled to a job? Or are you the person that, whether they got the degree or not, they actually worked on their skills, honed their skills, worked on projects in their spare time, as well as tried to build something worthwhile? And bonus points if you make money off of this. If this is some app on iOS or Android or Windows Store or whatever. If it makes money, then yes, employers are gonna respect that. Even if it doesn't, even if it's something that's just really popular, I don't know, maybe some sort of GPU tool for NVIDIA or whatever. Yes, employers respect that, okay? Okay, now you might be wondering, now how do I get my first job? Okay, that's a very good question there, okay? So what I did to get my first job was I went through a recruiter, okay? Now, there are headhunters that if you place your resume on job boards like Monster.com or Dice or CareerBuilder or whatever, there's going to be headhunters that are going to be combing through all the resumes and whatnot, and they're going to try and see if they can find a job that matches your skill set as well as your experience, okay? Because the skill set and experience typically determines on what job you're going to get first, as well as how much your job is going to pay, okay? And just because you post a resume online doesn't necessarily mean that you're guaranteed to get a job, okay? Because nobody is entitled to a job.
But I'm a woman and I have a vagina.
No, you're not entitled to a job.
But I'm black, and the white man's got me down. I'm entitled to a job.
No, you're not. Dude, you are like a bigot because I am gay and I have been oppressed for X number of years, therefore I am entitled to a job. No, you're not either. Because realistically speaking, if you suck at your job, then no one's going to hire you. On top of that, you got to prove to them that you don't suck. Ooh, that's actually kind of hard there. I actually have to do some actual work. Ooh, I think I actually have to, I have to actually bring some value to the team. Well, generally speaking these days, the exceptions to that are white women. Because, white women, they are so oppressed, even though they're the majority of the affirmative action beneficiaries. Yeah. So if you're a white woman, you've pretty much got it made. Although if you're a man of any other race or ethnicity, then yeah, you're gonna have to actually prove it, okay? Alright, sorry for the little rant there. I think that was actually necessary. But assuming that you've gotten yourself a recruiter that's willing to work with you, then typically what they do is they ask for your resume. And when you give them their resume, typically what they're going to do is they're going to edit it and they're going to reformat it a bit. So they're going to help you with the resume. Typically you don't really have to worry about formatting it as much in my experience, because they're typically going to use their own format anyway. And I think this goes without saying that some headhunters are better than others. Some have a good reputation of getting people jobs. Others, they don't do nearly as good of a job. So I'll have to leave that up to you, because the companies are going to vary from one area to the next. I've had one company that actually did well in my local area, but then worked with their branch on the other side of the country and they were terrible. So yes, well, of course, what's most important is getting an actual job and actually getting paid. So yeah, that's the main thing. Now, you have to remember that just because they submit your resume, that doesn't mean the company that you've actually been submitted to is actually going to get back to you and give you feedback. Because a lot of times you're going to be throwing resumes out into the void, and they're going to pass up your resume for someone who's either more experienced, that has better skills, is more qualified, or for whatever personal reason that they will not specify. So yeah, just be prepared for a lot of rejection, because chances are, especially as an entry-level candidate, you're going to get a lot of that. It's going to be tough trying to get an entry-level job. But let's say the client actually does get back to you and they say they want to bring you in for an interview or for a phone screen, okay? So sometimes the recruiter will actually give you material to actually brush up on, because they've had some previous candidates that successfully got through by doing this or that, or they had a candidate that completely blew the interview by doing something stupid or failing to go through the proper interview prep. Yes, take that to heart, take it seriously, okay? Because I've made the mistake of not being prepared for interviews and whatnot. Now, I'm going to expand a bit more on interview preparation in a minute, okay? Because I have failed a lot of interviews, and it took me years to find out what was going wrong and why I was failing so many interviews, because frankly nobody taught me and I didn't know who to ask. Now, a recruiter isn't the only way to get a job in this industry, although I've personally found it to be the easiest, but I can't say that it's always something I would recommend, because the recruiters, they typically call you about contract jobs, and preferably what you want is something full-time, unless the contract actually suits you, because a contract is temporary. And as a temporary employee, you're typically seen as more disposable than a full-time employee, okay? So chances are you may get laid off before your contract's set end date. Never actually expect that contract to last until that full duration, okay? Because in my experience, they never do. For some people they do, others they don't. And don't even expect to have a job within the first 2 weeks, because I worked in a aerospace company and I got fired 2 weeks in, not even knowing what I did. Sometimes you're going to want to have to apply to a company directly and not go through the route of going through a recruiter, okay? Now, let's say there's a company that you want to work for. Let's use Microsoft as an example. Now, of course, you can go to their website, throw your resume on there, and hope you get a bite. But in my honest experience, it's a lot easier if you know somebody in the industry. That's why it's always a good idea to build up your Rolodex, get to know people, go to meetups, share your resume, and hopefully make a few friends. Because it's not always what you know, it's also who you know. Because networking is now a much, much bigger part in getting a job in this industry. That's why you have so many recruiters, as well as job seekers, as well as industry professionals that already have jobs that are on LinkedIn, and they keep in touch with people through LinkedIn as well. So it doesn't hurt to have a business card or something, or a LinkedIn page. Just be careful not to dox yourself to people that you don't want to know your real name and so forth. So with that being said, there's also the possibility of working at a large company or a small startup company. Some people prefer startups, others prefer large gargantuan companies now. My experience is largely with the latter. Startup companies tend to be, at least in my experience, are a lot more choosy about who they hire. As far as the larger companies, they have been more willing to give me a chance. That's been my experience though. So your mileage may vary. But how do I go about meeting people, you might ask? Well, it really depends on where you are. Now, if you're in Silicon Valley, then you don't really have a whole lot to worry about, because there's always meetups on, let's say, geekwire.com or something like that. There's typically a calendar where they have these things just planned out in advance, and you can sign up through them via Eventbrite or whatever. But what if I don't live in an area where they actually have these meetups or tech jobs? Well, then you're going to have another obstacle to overcome there. My recommendation: save your money and move. That's what I did. But if moving is not an option for you, then yes, you could probably look into working remotely. But chances are you're not going to find a whole lot of jobs that are going to allow you to work remotely, because a lot of times they're going to expect you to be there, available for meetings. Sometimes they need you to be physically present, and it really just depends on the company. Some do, some don't allow you to work remotely. But if you really need to work remotely, then I guess what you could do is work as a freelancer and get contracts on Upwork. Now contract work, as I explained earlier, it can be a bit of a gamble, so you're kind of taking a risk there. Same goes with Upwork. The first few clients are the hardest ones to get. I actually tried Upwork, but they didn't have a lot of work there that suited my skill set, so it just wasn't really something that I knew was going to work for me. I mean, if you're a web dev, yeah, you'll probably get work on Upwork all day. But if you're a native developer who works on low-level software, then yeah, you're much better off going to a particular company that will actually hire you for that type of work. So that being said, don't hold your breath on getting something remote. I mean, go ahead and shoot for it though. Okay, getting back to the interviewing part. Now, let's assume you actually do prove yourself to some company, your employer, hiring manager, that does potentially want to hire you. Now, now preparation is very important, okay? Now, you want to go in knowing your stuff. You don't want to just go in there and fumbling and bumbling around, hoping that you're going to get things right, because honestly speaking, most companies tend to do tech interviews very poorly. The tech interviewing process is just been broken. It's been broken for decades, and I don't see it changing anytime soon, because most people have just learned to just roll with it, and those that have learned to roll with it are often the ones that are repeating the same mistakes in the interviews, as far as the interviewing process goes, that is. Now, if you really want a job, What you need to, you cannot, I can't stress this enough. You absolutely, positively must know your data structures, okay? I don't care what language it is. I don't care how good you think you are. If you go in there not knowing how to reverse a string, how to traverse a linked list, get the second to last node in the linked list or whatever, then yeah, they're not going to hire you. Chances are. And you need to know big O notation as well. That's another thing. You can't just go in there and say, well, yeah, well, I'm really experienced and they're going to hire me. No. Now, they're also going to whiteboard you. And honestly speaking, whiteboards suck. You got to do some code problem on the board. And they're standing over you the whole time. And basically, you have to do it with minimal to no error. And you have to do it fairly quickly, too. Now, I know a lot of people will say, well, they just want to test your problem-solving skills. Yeah, right. They still want a right answer. They still want someone that can actually code, and they're still going to want someone that can actually meet their expectations. So even if you do manage to solve that problem, they want you to do it with perfect optimization in many cases. And towards the end of the interview, always ask questions, okay? That's very important because that shows the employer that you're actually interested in the job. Because if you don't ask any questions, they're just assuming that, oh, you're just replying at random places and you don't really care where you work. In many cases, that is. So ask a question or two. Like ask them, how long have you worked here? How long have you been in business? What's the first thing that I can contribute to? Or ask about the ramp-up time and all that good stuff. And don't fake interest either. I mean, be genuinely interested in working for that company. Because a lot of times they can tell. They can sniff it. It's like they can smell it almost. So, yeah, now, honestly speaking, there's a lot of incompetent interviewers there. I've met some that were just so incompetent to the point where I felt like I was conducting the interview. And yet I still didn't get the job. So, yeah, you're likely going to run into all kind of stuff out there. And if you need more help when it comes to interviewing, job searching, and all that jazz, you can always go to CS Career Questions on Reddit or something. In my experience, there's not a lot of places you can go to actually get help because tech interviews are very unique as opposed to most industries, okay? In my experience, it's the most broken and it's the most unique at the same time. So, yeah, don't be afraid to go seek out some help. Now, I may not have all the answers, but you're always welcome to still ask me. If you want to hit me up on Discord or ask me questions in the comment section, that's fine. And I'll do my best to help you. So hopefully this was a fairly decent introduction into hopefully getting your foot in the door and getting a job. Now, in the future, what I'll probably do is videos that specifically target a specific aspect of job hunting or trying to find a job. I just wanted to throw everything in a quick video here because I get a lot of people asking me these questions and sometimes I can't remember everything off the top of my head. So I wanted to summarize this in a video and hopefully be a starting point for some people out there. Now, if you want to see me do something specific, anything in particular that relates to this topic, feel free to go ahead and comment in the comment section and I will consider it for the future. Or if you want, you can DM me on Discord instead. Either one is fine with me. So hopefully that this was enlightening to some of you, and hopefully this answers a lot of the questions that people have been asking me, okay? So thanks for listening. This is Arrow Shogun, and I'll see you next time.